Hello, welcome to Cardial Couture. My name is Judith, and I would like to thank those who liked my last video and subscribed to my channel. I really appreciate it. For those of you who are new to the channel, I purchased the Lutterloh system last September, so almost a year ago because we're in July today. And when I purchased it, I had the idea of creating a YouTube channel in which I would share my experience on the Lutterloh system and explain how we go about constructing the garments. So you'll see me learn as I go along. You'll see me make my mistakes and then the final result of the garments as well. So today we're doing a blouse or a top. Hold on, I lost my page here. This little pink top here that has the tassels, and it comes from the classic collection number 6. My book is falling apart. And I'm going to use this light cotton with these little dots on it. And I also purchased the cord for the tassels down here. So I'm going to change my camera, we're going to analyze the pattern together, and then we're going to construct the garment. So here's our pattern number 13, and then is the blouse, and that's the approximate fabric length. If I just zoom in a bit here, so we look at this. So here we see we've got gathering, we have a neck, a collar here. We have these tassels. It's not clearly indicated how we're going to attach these tassels. We'll look at that later. And then you see here that the blouse is worn outside and seems to have an elastic on it. So and you have sleeve cuffs here. So let's turn this around. And we find our pattern 13. I'll just zoom out a bit here so we see it a bit better. Okay, so let's start with the back. B is back. The middle of the back here, HM, is a dashed line, which means it's placed on the fold, so there's no seam in the back. And we see the picture here, there's no seam here. This is your waistline, so the top goes below the waist, so normally you're going to use your bust measurement from here all the way up, and then your hip measurement all the way down. This indicates, as we confirmed on the front picture, that we've got elastic on the bottom, here on both sides. If we come up here, we have to notice that sometimes this looks like just an interfacing line, but here you have 2 letters, DD, which means this actual part here is a separate piece. So you're going to trace probably the whole pattern as is, that's what we'll do, and then we'll deduct 3 centimeters here, and we'll have to add a seam allowance, so I'll show you that. So these two get sewn together. The letters here are important, so B is going to match with this shoulder. So for the back, that's pretty much it. If we look at the front here, this is a separate collar piece as well, and the A is going to match with the A here, so that's the collar. And then we have these squiggly lines, which means we're going to have to do gathering stitches because this whole piece of fabric has to shrink and fit into this length here. So that's what the gathers are on the front of the shirt here. So that's gathering here. What else? So this is also sewn on the middle front. There's no seam on the front. This is your neckline that you can adjust as you want. And we have to do for the neckline and the collar, we have to do interfacing. So you're going to cut these out twice and then do another piece in interfacing. Again, this is your hip line, your waistline. And what else? So here we have E. So these E's mean the sleeve. So this is the sleeve trim. So you're going to cut this out approximately, again, depending on your size. You're going to make sure it goes around. Once you finish your garment, you're going to measure from here all the way around to here. Add seam allowances, and that'll be your trim that will show up here on your sleeves. So I'm going to go trace my pattern. I'm going to cut out my fabric, and we'll be back for the garment construction. So here we are, we're ready to assemble our top. So I did something different from my previous videos. I chose not to add the seam allowance to the actual pattern itself. So I've got the seam allowance here, and I'll explain in my conclusion why I chose to do that. The first step then will be to sew our shoulder seams together here on the top, the front and the back, and then the side seams. And the side seams we have to sew from the armhole downwards. So if we look at the pattern here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 dots, and the sleeve ends at the 4th dot. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is here. I would sew from here downwards, and on the other piece too, so it would be here. And what you can do just to make sure is line up your 2 bottom pieces and just make sure that you're sewing at the right spot. sew shoulders and side seams, and we'll be back. I've sewn my shoulders and my side seams, and it's good to just test to make sure that they line up on both sides. And I don't have red overlocking thread, and sewing did exist before overlockers were invented, so I used my pinking shears to cut this off, and I'll probably in certain videos explore different ways of finishing the seams here without having to use an overlocker. So I forgot to mention that on my pattern here, what I did was I did raise the neckline, so the neckline was here initially. I raised it up to here, so I shortened it. And I also put 2 inches of seam allowance on the bottom because for my elastic on the bottom, I decided that I wasn't going to sew the elastic to the fabric, but rather do a casing and then put the elastic in there. So that would be my method for doing that. The next step is here. If we look at the pattern, I'm going to do the gathering stitches here. So if I just zoom out here again, move this over. So within the seam allowance, I'm going to sew 2 rows of stitching close to each other with the longest stitch length on my sewing machine, and I'm going to leave the thread tails long on both sides so that I can pull them. So the gathering stitches here and on this side, that's the next step. So here we have our top. I've put in the gathering stitches up here, and the next thing is to do the facing. Normally I do the facing at the end, but in looking at the pattern I realized that all of this neckline here is going to have to fit into the collar, so it's better to do the facing right now. So here are my 2 facing pieces. I'm going to come and sew them together here on the bottom so that they match, and then that'll be one piece, and I'll come back and we'll pin this in place and sew the facing. So here we have our facing. I had to unsew a bit of it. You have to make sure that the V corresponds to the V that you have here. So you're going to lay right sides together like this and come and pin it all along the inside here and all the way up here, and we're going to sew within based on our seam allowance. So I'll be back. So here's my front here. I turned it around and I ended up top stitching to keep it in place instead of under stitching. I did cut the seam allowance. I didn't realize make it perfect here, so there's a bit of a, it's not a perfect here, but I did round it out so that it looks nice from the front. So I top stitched. Then now we're going to set this aside and we're going to work on the collar. So we have 4 pieces of collar here, and I believe this is the back collar. So I've got 4 of the back because it's double each side and the front and back of it. I've got some lining, and this is the front, so I have 4 pieces in the front. I'm going to put lining on, not lining, interfacing, sorry, on both of these here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've got the right front pieces here. Which one's the front? I'll just figure this one out. And then based on the front, I'm going to do 2 buttonholes here. So within the pattern piece here, 2 buttonholes because I want to put my drawstring through my collar. So I'm going to iron on my interfacing, do my buttonholes, and we'll be back. So just to be clear here, I checked my pattern. I don't know if you can see, but the C is on the front here. So what it is, I took my pattern piece, this is the front part, I traced it to my seam allowance, and this is where I'm going to put the buttonhole. Then I have the opposite side, also with the C. Did the same thing, that's where my buttonhole is, and then these are the 2 back pieces that I'm going to iron on the interfacing. So here we have our front collar pieces. So I have my buttonholes here for my thread. This is the back piece that's been interfaced. So I'm going to set these aside. These are the back pieces. D is the back middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pieces like this that match opposites. Then we're going to take the other 2 that match opposites, and we're going to iron the interfacing on this, and we'll be back for the next step. Okay, so here we have our front pieces, and these are the back pieces. So what we're going to do is take all the non-interfaced pieces, so this is the middle front. We're going to pin this here, pin the other middle sides here on the non-interfaced piece, and then we're going to pin the back ones here together. Do the same thing with the sides with the interfacing. So I'll pin all that and I'll come back to show you so that it's really clear. Okay, so here we have the non-interfaced version. So you have to make sure right sides are together. So like this, pinned together, and then the back seam here. Same thing again here for the back. Right sides together, side seams, back seam. So we have 3 seams to cut sew here and 3 seams on this one, and we'll be back for the next step. So here I have my 2 pieces sewn. I cut the seam allowances, but before cutting the seam allowances, I did check to make sure that the 2 pieces were okay. So I've cut them on both here. And what we're going to do now is take 1 piece and put right side up. So this is the interface side, for example. I'm going to take the non-interface side and line up all the seams here and place it on top of it so it fits perfectly. This. And then we're going to pin all the inside here. We're going to pin down here, but before pinning down here, we're going to take the side with the interfacing and we're going to fold in the seam allowance like that. So it'll look like that. It's a bit small for my seam allowance, but anyways, I'll put like this. And then I'll sew all the way up to here. So I'll do that on both ends where the bottom part of your seam allowance is turned in here. So I'll go pin that, sew it, and we'll be back. So here I have my 2 collar pieces sewn together. I did cut off my seam allowances and I did put little, I cut through here. I forget the English word for it, but so when you've got a curved seam, sometimes it's better to do those slashes here up to the seam sewn so that it turns over better. So the next step is to really take this, turn it inside out all the way around and really get your seam lined up properly here and give it a good press. And then after that, we'll be back to attach this to the shirt. So I'm going to finish doing this and we'll be back. Okay, so what I did now is I've got my shirt inside out and I've located the middle back, and I did that by putting my 2 shoulder seams together like this and then just pulling on the shirt back, and I put a pin to locate the middle back. Then I've got my collar here, which is the middle back seam. So the non-interface side is going right sides together with the shirt on the inside. We're going to start pinning around like this. And normally this shoulder seam matches the other one, hopefully, or approximately. I'll just get it as close as possible. On the inside, we'll have to get this to line up. Okay, now we're coming around to the front. So the front part here has to line up with the front that's here, the middle front. So we're going to pin that in place. And then what we have here is, this is wider, so this is where the gathering stitches come in. So we're going to gather, pull on these and create gathers, a whole bunch of gathers, and then we're going to loosen them up a bit until they fit, and try to do them evenly on the distribution here. So I'm going to pin this in place. This one still needs a bit of gathers. This part is not gathered here. I'll just pin this. Okay, so I'm missing some gathers here. Let's move this along here and gather a bit more. And it seems to work. There we go. Okay, so this, you're going to try to get this to stay in place too within your sewing. Make sure the other side is the same way, that it's, this one seems to be a bit shorter, but as long as we catch it in the seam allowance. It's a bit fiddly here. This lines up with this. Okay, so now that we've got our collar in place, we're going to make sure the back part is below. We're going to sew all along here where you have your pins on the non-interface side of the collar. So all the way around. So I finished stitching the inside of the collar, and I put my cord through the collar here. So I've got my collar is finished up. What's left is the bottom and the sleeves. So we're going to start with the bottom. I'm just going to turn this inside out so it's easier to work with. So what I did is I zigzagged my bottom because I don't have red serger thread, but if you have serger thread, just serge the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I folded it over once like this, and then I'm going to fold it over again like this. So this is my elastic, so that it's going to be fit in here, because I'm going to do basically run the elastic through the seam on the inside. I'm not actually sewing the elastic sewing the elastic to the fabric. I'm going to just run it through, sort of like I did for my cord on the top. The reason I'm doing that and not sewing it directly is I'm not sure I'm going to like the elastic, so I want it to be easy to take out the elastic and then cut my shirt if I want to. So I'm going to just pin this all along, come and sew it along, and then I'll put in my elastic. I'm leaving on the side seam about an inch and a half open so that I can get my elastic through there, and then we'll come and close it off afterwards. So I'll be back after that. So here I sewed my hem on the bottom and I put in my elastic. So I left an opening, and I haven't closed it yet because I want to see if I like the elastic or not. I did read that we have to calculate our waist length, circumference, and then take out 1.5 to 2 inches, which I did. And then actually left my actual waist circumference, but at the extra 1.5 inches or 2 inch, I overlaid like this, and then I sewed a zigzag to close my elastic. So it's not super tight elastic. I'll see what it looks like. I'm going to try it on in a few minutes to have an idea if I like this or not. Then the last step is the sleeve. So here we have our sleeve opening, and you have to calculate the sleeve opening here. If we take this last piece of the pattern, it says 6 centimeters high by about 50 centimeters. So that's where you have to do the calculation here to see what the right centimeters are. Don't forget to put in your seam allowances. 2 of these, 1 for each side. You're going to interface half. Now 6 centimeters is, so half of it would be 3, so that's like 1.25 inches about of a seam. So your sleeve is going to be 1.25 inches. If you want it wider, then you just make this wider. So I'm going to try this on and see if I want a wider sleeve or not, depending on where the sleeve falls. I'll cut out my sleeves and we'll be back for the final step. So the final step for our top is the sleeves. So I've cut out 2 sleeve pieces here. I decided to go with 10 centimeters instead of 6 centimeters in width. So I calculated my armhole length. So I've got my seam allowances. The next step is to take each piece, fold it in half, right sides together like this. You're going to come pin your both ends here on each side. You're going to sew, press open, finish your seam allowances, and once that's done, you're going to turn it so that you have your wrong sides together. So you're going to have a cuff like this. If you fold it evenly, you'll have a cuff that's evenly folded, so just make sure it's all even. Press it. I chose not to interface. You can interface if you want. So that will have our 2 cuffs here once we come back, and we'll attach these to the top. So you should have two sleeves that look like this that are folded right sides out with the wrong sides here. You have your sleeve seam here. So what you're going to do is turn your shirt inside out and then come and put right sides together where you have your middle seam here lining up with this seam. And you're going to pin it all the way around in here like that. On each side, you're going to sew, finish off your seams, give your shirt a good press, and the top is finished. So this is the final product before I go show you it when I'm wearing it. Here are my sleeves that are sewn on, and I finished them with just my pinking shears inside. And just to recap the blouse, so we have our collar here. I do have my gathering on both sides. I used buttonholes here to be able to put my cord through to have that. The part I forgot to film was that once I had sewn the collar here, I turned the other collar here on the inside like this, and I sewed it all by hand. So that's closed like that. This is my facing here. I didn't quite get the V proper, but it was, other than that, I did top stitching here to close that off. In the bottom here, what I did is I sewed the hem to do a casing, and I put in elastic just through the casing, and the elastic I calculated was about 1.5 to 2 inches less than my waistline. So that is the top. So now I'll go throw this on and you'll see the finished product. My top, it's perfect. It's really hot today, so I'm going to really benefit from this light top. It's I'm really satisfied with the result. So when I was constructing the garment, I told you that at this time I decided to draw my pattern without the seam allowance on the paper pattern, because so far I've been adding the seam allowance directly on the paper pattern. And I heard in different comments and other websites that the ideal thing is not to add the seam allowances, and I thought about it, and I think the reason is that if you want to make adjustments to your pattern, it's better to have the pattern as is and not have the clutter of the seam allowance. So going forward, because I want to try to improve in the fit on my different garments, I'm going to stop adding the seam allowance to the paper pattern and adding it just when I sew, so that I can make the adjustments on my pattern more easily. So during the video, I had placed an order for at the Lutterloh Canada website, and I received my additional binder here. And I also subscribe to the quarterly updates, so I've got my summer supplement here that I haven't really looked at yet, but anyways, that's that. I did order the spring one, which is a past one, because I want, in here there's a pair of full-figured jeans that are interesting, and there's a few tops, like for example this top I find very interesting, so I ordered the spring one, so I'll have that in my collection too to share with you. And while I was on the website, I noticed they have the seam allowance guide for scissors, this here. That is made in Florida, Naples, so I think it might be the same people that have Lutterloh that make this, but basically what this is it's you've got two magnets. One is for a straight blade and one is for a slanted blade, and you put it on your scissors like this, and so you calculate from here to here. That's my 5/8 seam allowance. So instead of having to pin your pattern paper, you still have to do that, but instead of having to trace the seam allowance across on your paper with chalk or whatever, you put this on, and in theory, as you cut this way, you put your black thing along the pattern and it does your 5/8 seam allowance, so it saves one step. I haven't really tried it yet, so I'll give you an update on my next video. It was about $20 or $15 Canadian, I forget, so it's not that expensive, so I'll just let you know if it helps or not. So that's that. And for my next video, what I did is in September it'll be almost a year. It'll be a year that I've purchased the Lutterloh system, and in my first year the objective was to really improve my sewing techniques and to see if I was able to figure out how to construct the garments without the instructions. And in my journey I made pants, and the first pair of pants was a standard pair of pants which were too small, and that's when I realized I was considered full figure for the Lutterloh system. So then I compared a standard pattern with a full figure to see what is the difference, and then I made full figured pants. So that's my pants experience so far. But I purchased the winter one before I knew that it was full figure. And in here, there's a few pair of pants that interest me, but this one really interests me. So what I want to do as the last step of my first year journey is to see if I'm able to modify a standard pair of pants to make it full figured, so that I can leverage the standard pants in the Lutterloh system, or if I'm always having to use the full figured versions only. So a few of my viewers have given me suggestions on how to adjust pants, and I've seen some different methods as well on YouTube. So in my next video, I'm going to trace out the pattern, maybe 4 or 5 times. I'm going to try each and every technique to adjust it to based on my measurements, and then I'll evaluate which of the 4 or 5 techniques best suits me in order to adjust pants and see if I can make these pants. So next video is pattern adjustments, and I'll be using an old bed sheet to just do quick versions of these pants, and then once I've got the right pattern adjustment, the video after that I'll actually be making these pants with the right fabric. So that's what's in store for the next video. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, I invite you to subscribe, share it, and like the video, and thank you, and we'll see each other the next time.